Pixel Therapy is a member of the But Why Though podcast network.
Go to butwhythoughpodcast.com for an inclusive geek community offering pop culture news, reviews, and podcasts.
That's been my highlight of working in the gaming industry, being able to meet so many different wonderful people with so many different wonderful experiences, and even experiences that aren't so wonderful, but being able to create spaces where we can comfortably be vulnerable and experience these things and develop authentic friendships. That has been one of my favorite things in the industry.
Welcome to Pixel Therapy, the video game podcast where we look at the games we play through the lens of the player, where what you play is just as important as how you play it, and where emotional intelligence is a critical stat. Every other week, we bring on a guest who may or may not consider themselves a gamer to discuss the games that have made them and changed them, and all the feelings they have about our favorite pastime. I'm your co-host, Jamie, pronouns she, her.
And I'm your co-host, Spencer, pronouns they, them.
And this is Pixel Therapy. Let's get started as we always do with our Patreon shoutouts. This is our special thank you to everyone who subscribed at our Patreon name in the credits tier for the month of February, because it is somehow fucking March already.
How?
Today, we'd like to say a very, very big thank you to Val, Genevieve, Lindsay, Grace, Jackie, Ben, and Pimhatai. Remember, if you lovely listener want to get your name in the credits, you can hop on over to patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can subscribe for as little as $2 a month and get access to a monthly bonus episode of the show. It's just Spencer and I chatting it up for your listening pleasure. And if you're a fan of what we do here on Pixel Therapy, please consider sharing us with your friends and family, rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, or you can even write into the show by emailing us at pixeltherapypod@gmail.com. We'd really love to hear from you all anytime.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Spencer, it's time to get cozy. It's time to pull up an armchair. Feel free to lie down on the couch. Let's talk about our feelings. How are you today?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
It's been a week. Sure.
Like every week.
Can relate. Yeah. Like the one before it and the one to come. I think it's one of those weeks where I'm reminded that video games aren't gonna save the world.
No.
But they can provide ways to cope with the world or make sense of the world or be in the world without and taking a break from the world. And so I am grateful to them for that this week.
Yeah, that resonates. It's a lot. There's a lot going on outside the four walls of my safe little cozy privileged existence. And I don't know, scary out there. But it feels weird to be like, I'm doing good. Doesn't feel fair, but I am doing good. And I had a doctor's appointment this week.
Oh, self-care.
Self-care. I haven't had a physical basically since before the pandemic started.
My.
We moved last year, and I've got a new doctor and went and saw the new doctor for the first time.
Nice,
got a tetanus booster.
Hey.
Got some blood drawn.
Good to have. Good to do.
Got a clean bill of health. Everything's good. I'm in tip-top shape. But yeah, that was an experience.
Good, I'm glad you're in tip-top shape.
Me too. It's like, really? I don't feel like it. I feel like everything is. They're like, nope, blood work came back good. Bye. I was like, all right.
I only feel like I'm taped together and running on fumes. Good to know. Thanks, body.
Just all in my head. Head. Spencer, we've been playing some video games.
Yeah, we have.
Been playing a couple video games. Really just 2 video games.
Yeah, just 2. I mean, not the 2 that some might think. I know it's been a big release month.
Yeah, so some people might be like, my God, you're two-fisting Horizon Forbidden West and Elden Ring? No.
When do you sleep?
No. Oh my gosh. Elden Ring, though, Siren Song. Gonna probably get to that at some point. But no, we've been playing Horizon Forbidden West, which we alluded to on last time around, last podcast. And neither one of us are finished with it.
She's massive.
I think I'm got about 30-ish hours in. Do you know roughly where you're at?
I think I'm like 25 hours in, but I feel like story-wise, I'm probably much further behind you because I keep getting distracted.
There's a lot of question marks.
Yeah, I feel like this installment is the scale of side quests and things in the map. It almost reminds me of like Assassin's Creed Valhalla and its borderline overwhelmingness. But sorry, we can. Go on.
No, you're fine.
Easing us into
this is a conversational podcast, so you're just having a conversation. Yeah. So we've been playing Horizon Forbidden West. So today we thought we'd give you some initial impressions on Horizon Forbidden West. This won't be our full conversation about Horizon. We both really want to finish the main narrative and kind of come back. So I don't think we're going to be commenting too much on the narrative in this conversation, but more just talking about our initial impressions of the world, the gameplay, general impressions of that kind of stuff. And then we also played a little game called A Musical Story that came out this past week, which is just a short little indie game. We wanted to give you all a little something, a little spice,
some range. No one can say we don't have range.
No one can say that we don't have range. So we're playing the big beefy boy Horizon, and then tiny little indie game,
little tiny story. Beefy boy,
little tiny
beefless boy.
Beef. Okay, yeah, the vegan
tiny
option.
Vegan boy.
All right, so let's start with Horizon Forbidden West. Spencer, you said you're about 25 hours in. What is your impression of the game so far?
Yeah, so just to remind folks, a little set dressing here.
Dress the set. Dress that set.
You play as Aloy, a blood-haired warrior. They call her blood-haired in the game, so I thought that was fun.
That's kind of gross.
And she is a person who has grown up in this society where 1,000 years after the fall of humanity, humanity has been reduced to, kind of primitive, technologically wise, nomadic societies after the fall of this huge AI takeover. Climate change was ravaging the earth. And so this big company put together this plan where they would kind of create these machine animals whose jobs were to revegetate and make the earth inhabitable for animals and people again through this large terraforming initiative. So these machines all look kind of like different animals, and they'll have different functions, from like churning the earth and making soil plantable to like cleaning the air and the water. They got hacked, long story short, and it didn't go as planned, and the machines went bad, because their lights turn from blue to red when they're in bad mode.
No.
And they just fucked up all the shit, and humanity, like the apocalypse happened anyway. And so Aloy, the main character of this game, is part of like the remnants of humanity that's left behind. And she happens to be a clone of the woman who kind of invented the initial program that was meant to save the world. And in her reality, in her present, she's finding that the world is veering towards apocalypse yet again. And someone has sort of influenced the machines to the point where their terraforming functions have been overridden. They are actively destroying the earth and rapidly speeding up the timeline towards which the earth is approaching yet another climate disaster. And so Aloy is doing what she can with her arrows and spears and what she can salvage from this technology to kind of push back against this overwhelming force. So
I just want to applaud the succinct way you were able to lay out the narrative there. A friend of mine asked me to explain the plot of Horizon to him actually earlier this week, and I then regaled him with a 45 minute.
Oh my God. Like, so listen, a baby is born.
Oh, I really did. I was like, all right, so we start. And I was like, and this is what you know at this time, but this is what's actually going on behind the scenes. Yep. So,
the camera pans over ruins of highly technologically advanced society.
So anyway, just want to applaud your succinct summary there, and that you didn't take us through a 90-minute epic.
That's for our Patreon subscribers.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
My Horizon fan fiction. No, but I guess so. The first game came out in 2017. So it's been a few years. And I guess at the end of the first game, Aloy saves the world from machine destruction. In this game, it starts right after the end of the first game. Mm-hmm. You learn that Aloy sort of basically... she realized that an ally that she had been working with in the first game wasn't completely honest with her. Mm-hmm. And he had his own agenda. And so when Aloy thought she was destroying the threat that was going to eradicate humanity, she found out that she actually just ended up helping this Aloy's ally. She helped this person just sort of transfer the evil AI into like a futuristic USB port that he could then use to like use it for his own machinations, which we have yet to learn what they are. So that's kind of what's setting up the plot of game 2, is that she didn't actually save the world. She just delayed it, she just delayed its end. And she needs to find this guy who was her friend and figure out what he thinks he can do by holding on to this technology. And there's also a mysterious other threat emerging. So I think one of the things that I initially love about this game is just that juxtaposition of you really feel your smallness as a human being who has very primitive weaponry. Like you basically salvage parts from machines to build your armor, build your weapons, but you're using spears, arrows, like slingshots against these massive metal and acid and fire breathing machines that are very fast and strong. And so like one of the things that makes the game technically challenging is you can't just go in spear blazing, hacking and slashing your way through these battles. It's a combination of stealth and really strategic usage of your weapons, cycling through various ones, and also targeting weak spots and really approaching each machine holistically, if you will, to take it down in a way that makes sense. And I should mention that something Aloy also has is something called a focus. It looks like a Bluetooth that she wears on her ear, and it allows her to scan her surroundings and get information about enemies, see things that are left behind by what humans in her life call the old ones, which are the people who died out 1,000 years before that created this technology. This game is also set in a approximation of the American West. So you're basically traveling from Aloy's home, which is insinuated to be like the East Coast, northeast of the US, traveling across deserts, canyons, forests, basically this area spanning from like what once was Las Vegas, Nevada, all the way to San Francisco. So it's a vast open world. And so, you know, that challenge was something that I really like about the game, that juxtaposition and that feeling of, wow, I really feel like I'm overcoming insurmountable odds. It has taken me a bit to sort of ease back into the combat and not feel like a total noob. I am appreciative of there's expanded options for making the combat more approachable in this game. There's also a lot of accessibility settings that kind of took away from the more time-based, or like if it's virtually impossible for you to move with the speed or precision that would require you to be constantly firing shots while you're rolling and dodging and doing all these other things. Like they make it a lot more approachable in that way. I do find that I don't know, struggling a bit with, oh my gosh, like it's a learning curve, I feel. So maybe I'll pause there. Like how are you sort of easing back into the combat and mechanics of things?
Yeah, no, I definitely, when the game, well, I continue to be surprised by the difficulty. And I guess I remember it being challenging before. I think they've added just a lot more. Like, yeah. I don't necessarily know yet if that's good or bad. But they've added more machines. It feels like there's more something you sort of touched on, but just to clarify, when you're fighting the machines, you initially want to scan them with your focus, and then you can go into a detailed menu that will show you all the different parts that are identifiable on the machine. Like it'll have canisters sticking out or like parts of it that are these like white resource containers, or a piece that like controls certain attacks that it can do. And you can kind of pick and choose if you want to target specific parts of the machine to, maybe if I take out this part, it will nerf one of the attacks that the machine does, but that will also destroy a resource that I might be able to get if I leave that piece intact. So if the fight is harder, I have an opportunity to possibly get better loot, but maybe I won't even be able to take the machine out if I don't disable this attack, because this attack is so powerful that every time I get hit with it, I just die. So you're kind of like making those strategic decisions, and then you make all of those decisions, and then you get into the battle, and it's just like, fuck, just like throwing everything you have at it.
Yes.
Sometimes how I feel, I'm like, okay, I'm going to target the specific spot, and then I'm going to hit here because that's a weak spot. And then I'm going to knock off this piece of equipment so that I can get this and do this upgrade to my bow and arrow. And then the fucking, this, grizzly bear-esque machine just charges at me, and I'm just like, I just throw my explosive spear at it. I'm just like, blow up, die. So I don't know. I'm having fun with it, but it's definitely challenging. And I definitely remember being challenged by it in the original game, especially I think that this game takes a lot from the DLC that they added, because I remember playing the original game and there were moments of challenge, but by and large, I felt like I was at least I got to a point where I was pretty easily. I just remember the first time I like took down a Thunderjaw without it even hitting me. And the Thunderjaws are basically the equivalent of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. They're one of like the most powerful, like large enemies in the game. And I took one down very easily, and I was like, okay, I've ascended. Yeah. And then I went and played the DLC for Horizon Zero Dawn a few months later, and the polar bear-esque robots were just like destroying my shit. And it feels like they took kind of all the combat in this and kind of kicked it up. Some of the most difficult enemies in the game are the ones that will just charge at you very quickly and repeatedly. And sometimes it can feel a little like the width of their attacks feels a little unfair. Like I feel like even if I'm not dodging at exactly the right time, I'm still going to get hit. And some of the enemies that shoot fire, orbs of light, whatever. The ones that have ranged attacks, you can't just run and expect not to get hit, which I do think you could do in the first game. Like as long as I was mobile, I could pretty much avoid getting hit. And in this game, it's like, you can run. He's going to anticipate the fact that you're running and just shoot where you're going. And then I still get hit anyway. And so I feel like I'm still adapting to some of that. But I haven't yet felt like I need to bump the difficulty down. I'm definitely over leveling like crazy though.
You have to. I feel like you have to.
I think, I don't know who the person is. I'm sure there are people who are playing things right at the level, but that's not me. Like I'm playing on normal difficulty, but then I'm trying to ease the challenge for myself by over leveling and focusing on doing side stuff and getting better armor and gear so that I feel better prepared. And I do think the game wants you to do that. The other issue I'm having though with the upgrade systems with the game is that I feel like it's more difficult to tear resources off of enemies in this one. I'm just not finding. I remember that being like a huge part of my strategy in the first game, and was just constantly knocking resources off of. And just to be specific, tear means you can get weapons that specifically do, rather than doing damage to a part of a machine, it is focused on removing that part of the machine. So it removes it intact, and then you can pick it up and use it. And I've been trying to use that strategy in this game, and I'm not, by and large, having much luck with it. I feel like it takes a lot more tear damage to remove valuable pieces from at least the higher tier machines.
I feel a lot more like someone throwing handmade arrow, like resource weapons at a literal artificial intelligence that can predict my every move and also has armor. Like I feel like in the first game, I felt more equal, but in this one, the distance between what I'm working with and what I'm up against feels so much more realistic.
Yes. And they've added several key enemies that are just enormous. The way they've played with scale in this game, I think, is pretty impressive. Specifically, this isn't really a spoiler because they've shown this enemy in the trailers, but the Slitherfang, which is the giant snake, the way that thing moves and all the intersecting pieces of it, like, go look up a video of the Slitherfang because it's really impressive the way it moves, and it moves like an actual snake, and it is huge and fast and will target you so specifically. So I don't know, I'm enjoying it, but I do think there's a difficulty uptick that like, either I just got really bad at video games between the first one and this one, or the game legitimately did get more challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do feel like in this one too, I'm really feeling the impression of like when you mentioned the scale of the enemies, I felt like I was playing like God of War in some of the fights. Like I'm getting like Kratos vibes from how Aloy is sort of like approaching these massive enemies. I'm also seeing like, some like Breath of the Wild influence, and Assassin's Creed, like I said. And I felt like when I played the first game, I don't know, something about it felt very, and this isn't necessarily a critique. Like, I think the first game, it felt very unique and new in what it was doing. And I know now I've played the first game. This is the sequel. And it just, the pieces that it's drawing inspiration feels a little bit more, like it feels like a AAA sequel. Whereas the first one felt a little bit more like it had those indie roots. So that was just an impression I've had that I found interesting. It has leveled up in a lot of ways. Maybe let's talk about Aloy a bit and how she's coming off in the sequel and
sure.
How she's grown and changed. I think one of our early conversations was around some of the character NPC impressions of Aloy. Like, I thought maybe you could speak to like where she's at in this sequel, where she's starting from, and what her relationships are looking like now.
Yeah, sure. So as you alluded to, the game picks up pretty shortly, like just a few months after the events of the first game. And you learn pretty early that essentially, the first game ended, there's a big fight, everyone was celebrating, thinking that they had won, they'd staved off the end of the world, and Aloy just kind of peaced out, just kind of abandoned all of the friends that she'd made in the first game because she learned that the threat wasn't fully over, but she kind of just left. She kind of just ghosted everybody and didn't really partake in the celebration, didn't tell her friends what was going on or where she was going, and just left. And so I do think the game starts from this place of her reconnecting with a lot of characters from the first game, and all of them kind of be like, where the fuck did you go? Like, why did you just leave? Like, why aren't you accepting our help? Why didn't you tell us what was going on? We thought we were your friends and we want to help you when whatever comes next. And the first portion of the game is really centered on her kind of pushing them away. I think I'm very interested to see where they take this narratively. I think, Aloy is a main character that, by and large, a lot of reviewers don't seem to love. They find her kind of like tolerable. And I'm not sure yet where I stand with her in this current game. I think she's a person who is deeply flawed. But I think that's intentional. And I guess my end perspective of her will be on whether or not the game addresses it and acknowledges that she's flawed and that that's intentional or not. Because right now, like, I could just be reading these things as like a person who has been to therapy and a person who like recognizes some traits in Aloy and myself and seeing like, okay, this is a person who has been through a lot of trauma, who was raised in a really isolated environment, who was ostracized from people and her culture, who has this immense weight put on her that like no one could possibly bear, of being this clone of this old world scientist and feeling like she's the only person who can fix and save the world, and feeling like she's got to carry that and hold that. And none of that is a responsibility that any one person could possibly hold. And the way she carries that, I think, is very relatable, of just trying to feel like you have to just do it.
Mm.
And that you can't accept help. Like a lot of that resonates or feels familiar to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I want the game to address that those feelings aren't necessarily real, that you have to work through that you have to learn to accept help.
Yeah.
And it seems to be moving in that direction.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Like, I find myself empathizing a lot with Aloy. And I think, the fact that she ghosts people because she wants to protect them or because she feels like she's the only one who can get the job done. I can certainly relate to, where her social anxiety comes from, or where her sort of martyr complex kind of comes from. At the same time, I do find myself sort of disagreeing with her more in this game than I did in the first. Like in the first, I think also the scope of her journey has widened a lot. And I think in the first game, she was just coming of age and just sort of breaking out from this isolated state in which she was raised. Like she was essentially raised like on her own as an outcast from her own tribe. As there are tribes of nomadic humans in this world, and or they're not all nomadic, but they all kind of like salvage and go around. But anyway, like she was raised completely alone. Like as a child, like of course that would affect how you relate and form attachments to others. And it was largely about her figuring out who she was and why she'd always felt this way, and also understanding the meaning behind the technology that she had discovered. And in this game, it's tough because in a lot of ways, she has knowledge that no one else has. Like from the remnants of these technologies left behind, there are things like holograms or mysterious ruins of old laboratories or factories that to any person who had no idea where this technology came from, of course, they might think this is something supernatural or godlike. And so you see a lot of people in the world Aloy lives in thinking of these phenomenon that they see as being, this spiritual presence, seeing a hologram that still is persisting after 1,000 years and thinking that they're seeing, a vision or a spirit. And like all of that makes sense for what these folks are working with, and that the world that they've been raised within. And for Aloy, she's sort of seen behind the curtain and knows that none of this is from a god, that no one is gonna save them. They have to save themselves. And she feels like it's her duty to do that. But I think sometimes the way that comes across is just being really short and dismissive with people. Like when people come to her and their religion enters into the conversation, or a belief that they hold comes up, she's like a very immediately like very dismissive, like there are no gods. This isn't like scoffing or sighing in annoyance. And it's tough because I get where she's coming from. Like she must feel like a Cassandra, like feeling like she knows the answers, and people are so far behind where she is that it's stressful to hope that she's going to be able to save the world in time and bring folks up to speed. But at the same time, I also, I wish, I don't know, I find myself having a harder time being on this long road trip with her because she doesn't take any breaks to have fun. She doesn't take any moments where she lets her hair down a bit. And I think in a game as long as this one, I was thinking back, because the other game I've played that's been this long or this detailed was Assassin's Creed Valhalla a couple years back. And the main character of Eivor in that game, being a Viking, there's this air of like, yes, they have stuff to do and they have a conquest and they have a mission, but they're also happy to like go fuck off for a night and like drink or like party or like hook up or tell stories. They're very like gregarious, and I know that there's a difference there in how that character was raised. Like there's differences in trauma there, but I also found that like I just feel like with Aloy as in the driver's seat as this main character, I feel as though I too am on this highly stressful, relentless, lonesome mission and not feeling like there's any other characters I can talk to. Like there's no way to get away from Aloy's mindset. And that I feel like is wearing on me in a way that I didn't experience in the first game. I'm finding myself like butting heads philosophically with her more, or wanting her to be more empathetic to others in the way that they are relentlessly empathetic to her and are always trying to be like, hey, I know you don't have any time for me and you just want to get away from me as quickly as possible, but I just want you to know I'm in your corner. Like I want to see her sort of extend some of that care back. I don't know. That's a lot.
Yeah. No, I think that's valid though. And I'm not sure where you're at narratively in the story. I think I've seen inklings of them doing that a bit with her. I still want her to have more of a watershed moment. Like I'm still waiting for that to be manifested more clearly and explicitly. But I do think, it's tough because she clearly has empathy for people. There's plenty of side quests and stuff that you can encounter with her where she's doing things for folks that we probably didn't need to take the time to do. And there are certain side quests where she does show some empathy for the beliefs that people are holding, even while she's kind of dismissing them. She's like, okay, but like, here's why you can't do that. And I know that you think that that's the right thing to do because of XYZ, but here's how really works. I definitely put a lot of it back to, especially in the way that she approaches religion. She doesn't have any patience for religious beliefs getting in her way, but she was also specifically ostracized from her tribe and raised solo and like had to deal with all of that because of religion, because they believed her, because the religious beliefs of her tribe felt that she was some sort of bad omen and therefore pushed her aside. So I think her particular irritation around the religion stuff and that being a barrier does kind of trace back to her, and like her seeing that as the initial cause of her trauma too. People kind of blindly believing in something that they don't understand rather than actually like helping the human being right in front of them.
Yeah.
And she's kind of she encounters that at several different points in the story too, going into different towns and cultures and seeing how their religious beliefs are actually holding them back from being able to take care of the very human needs that exist right in front of them, and kind of relying on culture. And I think that's worthwhile. I think there's worthwhile commentary to have there. I think it becomes just more problematic when we start to see how the game has positioned itself using so much it's not Native American iconography exactly, but the game is definitely drawing from an inspiration of indigenous cultures in the Americas and using that as set dressing for so much of what happens in the game, for so much of the cultures, the way they present, the way they dress, even the way they live, some of their beliefs. It's all kind of pulled from that. And I think that to do that without involving indigenous folks in the conversation, and then to also have this white futuristic woman running around like dismissing everyone's belief systems, all of that creates a not good tension in the game that I think the first game had this problem as well. And I just think I mean, there have been indigenous folks calling out that this game is like culturally appropriating. I think it's certainly not for me to say whether it is or isn't. I personally think that folks have a good case for it being cultural appropriation. I think you can't look at this game and not see the influence of indigenous cultures on the way the different tribes and even the language that they use, tribe, brave. There's the savage slur thrown around occasionally. They have lessened the amount that gets used in this game than they did in the first game, but I still think it's the fact that it's there at all, especially after the criticism that the first game got, is really really upsetting and disappointing. And the fact that the game is not, I don't know, the game developers, the game itself is not addressing any of that at all. Not even they're trying to pretend like they're making this in a vacuum where it's not drawing on indigenous cultures, but it so very clearly is. And so when you combine that, sorry, go ahead.
No, just to take that a step further, I think something you brought up when we were talking about this a few days ago was the way that the game is insinuating that there's some sort of connection between indigenous people and sort of this less technologically advanced or less intellectually mature belief system. Like it's a completely like it feels like they're feeding into harmful stereotypes around what it means to be an indigenous person. And something you said was that there's often this thing in white settler narratives that indigenous people no longer exist, that they were a relic of the past, and that they, you know, through European colonialism were brought up to date or modernized and brought into, you know, fucking settler society. When the reality is that like indigenous people were there before, have continued to exist and exist now. And I feel like this game feeds into this white supremacist idea that like indigenous culture equates with like not knowing or not
not technologically advanced.
Yeah, like
whether it's I don't think it's an intentional thing that they did, but I think you can't. I find it hard to separate those things.
How can we say it's unintentional though? Because they crafted this world very intentionally using those kinds of imagery and language. Like I don't know. I don't know that I feel like we can say that.
I guess all I mean is I don't think that the developers of Horizon Forbidden West said what we want this game to say is that indigenous people are like X. But they absolutely pulled in the stereotypes and the beliefs that they subconsciously already had around what indigenous culture looks like and applied that to the way the vast majority of the characters and cultures in the game exist. And they did that without consultation with actual indigenous folks. Without considering what indigenous futurism like writers and thinkers might have to say about what a post-apocalypse society could look like in this scenario. And I think that's inherently where the problems come in. And I think it's with that, in that frame of reference, as a person sitting in the US and playing this game and seeing these like very obvious allusions to Native American iconography, I can't fully separate the idea that that's a cultural touchstone that they're using for so many of these people that Aloy is interacting with. And then for her to also be talking down to them. In many different scenarios. It chafes. It makes it hard to, like, I can't just set any of that aside. It's a problematic byproduct of the world that they've built. And so even though I'm enjoying the game and enjoying the story, and there's plenty that I can empathize with Aloy about and can like her as a character for XYZ, it also, like, it's something that is ever present, and I'm constantly clocking and just being like, I wonder why they decided to do this like this.
Yeah. And I find like she kind of comes off like this atheist, rational, talking head, like YouTube personality. Like like you said, it chafes. And I think, you know, they made the decision to set this world within the American West. And with, you know, the West was built by Black folks, Indigenous folks, Chinese folks, who were exploited and treated horribly racistly by white Americans who like to pretend that cowboys built the West. And I just feel like to have a game set here. Sorry, I'm already primed and on edge about that because of the comments coming out this week about The Power of the Dog, a movie about the American West that's a little gay and has some gay cowboys in it. Just check it, just watch it. But basically Sam Elliott, and a white actor with a big mustache who has acted as a cowboy in some roles, but is literally from like Sacramento, California or some shit, is acting like movies like Power of the Dog because it has like gay shit in it, is like not the real West. And the real West is like white dudes in cowboy hats. And like, that's also not the real West either. So I just don't know what world he's living in. So I guess I'm just like, again, they made the choice to build it in this setting. There is so much history and painful reality that was born in the American West, and to have a game set here where yet again, and even though we're 1,000 years in the future, we have this white person trying to tell other people using the power of logic and atheism to like put them down. Like it's hard to just completely like walk away from that. So
Yep. And I think a lot of folks want to give the game a pass or kind of hand wave it because the game is set so far in the future. But I think that does a disservice to all of us. I think that does a disservice to people playing this game. I think it does a disservice to like anyone who thinks critically about the media they engage with. Yes, within the world of the narrative, this is thousands of years in the future, and like all of today's society has crumbled. Sure. And yet this was made in and is being played in modern day context. And so I think the lens that we're viewing it through is appropriate and does matter. It's not like just because the game is set in the future, so far in the future, that it should be like inherently removed from modern day context and society, because we're playing it and it was created by people existing in culture and society. I don't know. I just hate that argument when it's like, but the world is completely different. And it's like, but you realize that the world was made by people who live right here today, and you're experiencing it as a person who lives right here today. So
exactly.
Anyway, that's our initial impressions on Horizon Forbidden West.
Lots to think about.
You knew we couldn't keep that short. I mean, one sentence review right now, Spencer. Are you enjoying the game?
Yes, I am enjoying the game.
Okay. So
it's beautiful. It's
oh man. Yeah, we didn't even get to how breathtaking the world is, the character models, the skin textures, the variety of faces and body shapes on display in the game. Really impressive. I'm sure we're going to talk more about Horizon on our next episode as we continue to play and get through more of the story. But do we want to talk about a musical story for a few minutes?
Let's do a little palate cleanser and talk about a musical story.
Okay, great. So a musical story is a game that came out just this past week on PlayStation, Switch, Xbox, PC, and mobile, developed by a small French indie game dev team called Glee-Cheese Studio. And it's a narrative musical rhythm game. So very dramatic departure from Horizon. It's got some gorgeous pixel art. I think that was one of the standouts for me personally with the game.
It looks almost like screen prints.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Really, really awesome.
Like brush strokes, like ink, blocked colors. Like it's very dynamic and really cool.
Yes. Great music. The game is set in like the 60s, 70s?
70s, yeah.
70s? Okay. And they really like nail that whole vibe.
Like Zeppelin, Floyd.
Yeah.
Fish. Yeah.
And it's all original music in the game. And like I said, it's a rhythm game. So you are... but I'd say it's very unique presentation for a rhythm game. I think anybody who's played Rock Band or Guitar Hero, you're pretty familiar with the idea of kind of notes dropping down on the screen on kind of a grid so you can follow the time pattern, and then you're hitting the buttons at the time that it looks like you're supposed to hit the buttons. This is a rhythm game that's very much designed around you actually listening to and being in rhythm with the music It takes away a lot of the visual indicators that you would usually have in a rhythm game, where in some rhythm games, you could almost turn the sound off and follow the visual cues. But this game, if you're not listening to and participating, like actively understanding what the music is doing, you won't be able to actually follow the rhythm. The way the pattern that you're supposed to play appears on the screen is that it will, in almost a Simon Says fashion, have a big circle on the screen, and the notes will kind of appear and you'll hear them play out in order. You're really just, I play this on PlayStation, and you're just controlling it with the right and left shoulder buttons.
Right.
So just a couple button input. I'm not quite sure how this works on mobile or anything, but it seems like you're really just working with 2 buttons for the entirety of the game. And you'll either hit the left button, the right button, or you'll hit both at the same time. That it gives you, like I said, a Simon Says round where it plays it for you once and shows you the pattern. And then you actually are like counting the beats in your head. You're actually, I felt like the fact that I had some musical training was actually helpful for this. I grew up playing piano, and I played saxophone in band all through high school. And being able to actually like count it down, like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then play my section of the song. Was really helpful. What did you think? What did you think of the rhythm mechanics?
I thought I really enjoyed the sort of minimalist design and the way that it has this thing where if you are messing up, it'll sort of progressively introduce some visual assistance to help you get the beat on track and be more successful. So I appreciated the sort of endless looping, and the way that if you did mess up, it didn't mean that the song had to end. Like it gives you chances to keep going and get through it. So I really enjoyed the way that mechanic was set up. I think I would have benefited from something like a metronome or something on the screen, just because as Jamie mentioned, it's like a circle and the notes are appearing around the circle. And so I would sort of take my eyes and try to follow around the line of the circle at the same speed that I thought I had done when it was first playing. And for whatever reason, I found that when I tried to make my eyes follow the circle and do the beat that way, I would often be off. But if I just like closed my eyes or just looked at the very center of the screen and just went with the beat, I would get it right. So there was something lost between the visual of the line and how much time was actually passing. Like there's distance between circles to indicate breaks, but they're not really reflective of the actual time that you need to pause in every situation. And so there was just like a loss of translation there that I think visually that made it tougher for me to actually get it right. So yeah, maybe something to help keep the beat would have helped. But
yeah, I feel like that's a great point. Like almost like just in the settings, if you could turn on a metronome, I feel like could have been a big help for folks who, I mean, like I think of, as I was playing the game, I was like thinking like my brother, who is a musician, like he probably would have found this game a lot easier than I did because he just naturally has like good rhythm built in. And I think this is interesting and unique in that it's a rhythm game that I think is more designed for people who have some sort of musical like proclivity. I think if you are someone who doesn't really have good rhythm or any musical experience at all, this might be a lot more challenging. Still think it's playable because, as you said, I think the way the game responds, there's no fail state in the game. You can mess up the piece or the line as many times as you want, and it'll just keep letting you do it until you get it right. And it, like you said, it'll slowly introduce more visual cues to help you get it correct. But if you want to actually do it right the first time, the only way you're going to do that is if you are legitimately understanding the music and able to replicate it. Like it's a rhythm game that prioritizes the feel of the music over watching it and responding to the visual. And I thought that was unique and interesting. I was pleased with that, even though I do think, especially as you get to later chapters of the game, they make some decisions that to me feel a little cheap. You get into some pieces of music where it's kind of improvisational. Let's put it that way, the lines that they're having you play. And so the notes are being played on various upbeats and stuff that just don't even feel, they're really not easily repeatable.
Right.
Off a one-off. It's like Simon says this, but what Simon is like saying and asking you to repeat back is almost incomprehensible in terms of musical form, because it feels like someone just riffing on their instrument.
Right.
And to duplicate that after hearing it one time is really, I don't know. I'm sure there are people who can do it, but I found it just got exponential. Like, I was getting frustrated at those parts because it felt cheap to me to be like, and then we'll just hit this note really randomly on this random upbeat, and then the next one's going to come on this random downbeat. And if you can't do that just like instinctively, then you're not going to get this.
Yeah. Like for a game that, like you said, is much more focused on feeling the music and being part of it and responding to it in that way, I think I would have appreciated a bit more flexibility in hitting the note prompts, or maybe it's okay to hold something a little bit longer to get a sound that is unique to you, or just to like feel into it and play it the way that you would. It almost feels like instead this game is really hammering down that to be a good musician, you have to get it absolutely perfectly every single time, or it is not okay, which isn't really how jam bands, like the kind of, like, it's sort of portrayed that this rock band you're in is a jam band who does get together and improvise and feed off of each other. And so how that then is reflected in the gameplay doesn't feel true to how they play together in real life, or how they would if they were real people.
100%. And I think that is drilled home narratively by what I would say is one of the most absurd choices that the game makes, which is that, as we said, like, there's no fail state in the game. You can play through the game and fuck things up constantly. And, you know, it'll just let you keep trying until you get it right. However, if you play through an entire chapter perfectly, you get a little star. And by perfectly, I mean, you hear the pattern once, and then you get it exactly right the second time. And as the chapters increase, like when the game first starts, each chapter will be like 1 or 2 lines that it gives you like that. By the time you reach the end of the game, you're getting 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of music that you have to do. And you have to do the whole chapter perfectly to get the star. If you get all the stars in the game, it unlocks a special bonus ending. That is a very different ending than what the actual ending of the game is, and really seems to be saying something that I think is really problematic about what it means to be a creative person, as well as a bunch of other. Spencer and I have some big issues with the narrative in this game. I think, let me just say, we're going to go into spoilers here in a second, but before we do, I think I'll just say that the narrative is about a young man who starts a band with his friends, and they go on a road trip to try to play this their first big concert. That's the narrative arc of the game. And then chaos ensues from there. There's no dialogue in the game. It's essentially, it's kind of like watching, I don't know, it probably took me 2 or 3 hours to finish it because I was trying to perfect some of the chapters, but you could probably get through this in an hour and a half to 2 hours. I guess it really just depends on how well the music stuff clicks with you. But it's kind of like watching a really long music video. Because there's music throughout, no dialogue, no text on the screen. There's no text to click through, no words. Like, the game is just the music and the visuals. And that's all pretty cool. But the actual narrative that they're conveying, we have some pretty serious criticisms of. So I think at this point, what would you say, Spencer? Should people play Musical Story?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it's doing, I will say for me, I had a very anxious week. And so being able to just look at circle and line and press button when circle on line was like very therapeutic for me. I was having some panic attacks late this week, and playing a game like Horizon, which is so narratively and functionally dense, it was just too much for me. And so being able to sit with this game and just be in the music for a couple hours was great. So I think for what it's doing, for the uniqueness of the design and how it's doing a new spin on a rhythm game, it was a bit of nostalgic, like Parappa the Rapper kind of feels too. And I loved it for that. I think as, again, someone who is in the world. I don't know. I think it could be, I think the way that it treats drug use and I think there's a misunderstanding here and a potentially harmful leaning into stereotypes around like how people engage with drugs and how drugs even interact with you. Like, I guess to be spoilery, the usage of what is heavily implied to be weed, marijuana, is throughout this game. But the way that the narrative takes it and demonizes people who engage with weed, I think borders on reckless and irresponsible and even feeds into harmful stereotypes, at least here in the US, about particularly people of color and their interactions with weed. Like, just to be clear, this podcast is a firm legalize, decriminalize, and release people in prison for weed charges. Like, and I think that this game sort of just leans the complete opposite way in terms of what it's saying about that. And I found it like, I think it could potentially be triggering for someone who identifies as a person of color and also someone who has had any interaction with weed. You're going to watch this game and be like, has anyone who worked on this game ever smoked weed? Because that is not what weed does to people. So there's that. And I did find it hard to, like, as I was playing the game, I was kind of like, they're not gonna. And then I was like, are they really? And then by the end, I was like, this is unacceptable and not okay. I think too, it also just goes into what we were saying before about like, I think it's sort of problematic in terms of what it's saying about perfection and having to be perfect being the only way to success. So I would recommend playing it with caution, and also us advocating you to play it is not us advocating for the beliefs of the people who made this game.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with everything you just said, and I think you did a good way. I think you said it well without spoiling anything too dramatic with the narrative. But yeah, this is a game that I think was enjoyable to play and has beautiful art, and the story kind of sucks.
Yeah.
For specific reasons that we're going to dig into here in a second. And I think if you it's not a very expensive game and it's out on most platforms, I think that the developer clearly has some skills in terms of the way they develop the game. I'd love to see them make another game.
Yes.
But I think they need to get some different writers in there and maybe broaden their perspectives before they try to tell a story again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think take all of that with the grain of salt that it is. If you're looking for an interesting new take on a rhythm game, it's a pretty creative alternative to standard rhythm game fare. But be warned that the story it definitely has its problems and could even be harmful depending on your personal situation. So I think now let's go ahead and dig into a little bit of spoilers so that we can just kind of put a pin on some of the specific feedback that we're giving and explain why we feel the way that we do. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the story starts out being very relatable. It sort of centers on a young Black man who is in a band with two friends. And I think something to note here is that the main character appears to be the only person of color who appears in this game. So that's something that I think was a miss because what sort of happens is this character is depicted as smoking weed, which for a game set in the 70s is like everyone was smoking weed.
Yeah.
But this character is portrayed as the only person in the group who smokes. And very early on, it's sort of established that his smoking, like that his bandmates know that he does it, but they just like don't say anything about it. And as the game continues, essentially the three of them decide to go on a road trip to perform in a music festival for the first time. where it gets kind of weird is that at some point in the journey, your main character is high and he has some sort of, the chapter is called Bad Trip. So he has a bad trip and he suddenly becomes violent, punches his bandmate to the point where his bandmate is bleeding. And then for the rest of the story, his bandmates are gone. He wakes up with them gone. He basically, finds comfort in the arms of a girl that was traveling with them that they met, who was a fellow singer, performer that they met on the road. And he gets into a car accident and wakes up in the hospital. And that's the end of the game. And I just, first of all, like I said, like we were saying about earlier, like weed does not make you hallucinate and become violent. Like that's like a psychosis thing. Like you might expect that from something like acid, or if the weed was like cut with something, but that's like never insinuated throughout the game. Like it always just shows him, rolling a blunt and smoking it. Like it's just like very normal. So like there's that problematic sort of assumption that like, doing or smoking weed turns you into a violent person. Yeah. And then just the fact that this character never, like there's no resolution with those characters. Like they're just gone for the rest of the game. There's no, he never speaks. We never really even see his face. So it doesn't feel, it feels random. It feels, like if these were his bandmates, like it seems like they're his closest friends. Like, why doesn't he care about what happened to them? Why did they just ditch him? Like, why? I think something you brought up too, Jamie, is that like throughout the game, they're in bars, they're at shows, people are drinking, people we see glasses, we see them throwing back shots and beer and things like that. And there's never an accompanying insinuation that alcohol is in any way negatively affecting them. It's highly normalized. When, at least in my experience, the most scary and physically threatening interactions I've had with people under the influence have been alcoholics who have become violent around me, or who, when they drink alcohol, their demeanor completely changes. And so I just found it was hard for me to sort of be like, okay, this is the only person of color in this cast. It's the only person smoking weed. And yet you're depicting them as being suddenly violent out of nowhere and having no care for their fellow humans. And like, it really just, I didn't understand why what I was seeing was happening. And I didn't feel like it was earned. And I also felt like, in some ways, that this character like was just being used like he looks very much like a Jimi Hendrix sort of character. Like he has a big afro, he has the bandana around his head, he plays guitar, and it's just kind of like, it almost feels like an aesthetic choice and not thinking about what it actually means to bring a person of color character into your cast and depicting them in a fair way. Like, I don't know, it really just upset me, and it turned me off in the whole second half of the game.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with all of that you just said. It is like they thought, kind of similar to the conversation around Horizon. It's like folks think they can make these decisions in a vacuum and not look at how it all kind of comes together and what it might be saying. Yeah. And I think if you're intentionally making the decision to make your main character a young Black man, and then like, okay, and he's gonna smoke weed. Okay, like there's nothing, and there's going to be a fight with the bandmates later in the game. All of those decisions on their own, there's like nothing really wrong with them, but it's the way they knit them. It's the way they like stitch them all together. Yes. And what it feels like they're saying, it's like, okay, he's Black, he smokes a lot of pot. The pot is a problem for him for some reason. Like it makes him not a good person. And so then he's going to like rage out on his bandmates and break up the band. What? Like, why? Yeah, and also why? Like the decision to set this in the 70s when, like you said, like marijuana use was rampant, especially in artist communities like that. It just doesn't seem realistic in any sense of the word. And I just think like I don't understand why the drugs had to even be in the story, let alone a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think when they said, I was so assuming that the drugs use was not a problem. Like that was so like far from my radar. It was like, okay, yeah, he's getting high. That's what a musician in the 70s would do. Of course.
He comes home from a hard day working in a fucking factory on his feet all day. Of course he's going to come home and smoke a little just to relax and like...
Yeah, I read it as so like, okay, yeah, that's just a thing about him is that he smokes pot, like along with probably everyone else in this world. Great, no problem. That as the story like built in the direction it was going, I was so not prepared for the marijuana to be a problem. I was so not prepared for like him smoking to be the problem.
Yeah.
The story shows them start their road trip and they go to this bar and he meets this young woman musician that he then encourages to come with them. And they immediately show that the two of them are like connected at the hip, like spending all their time together. She's influencing their music. That seemed like what the story would be about. Would be him like getting too obsessed with this girl and ignoring his other bandmates and trying to take their music in a different direction. So they get in a fight and then they make up at the end. That seems like an appropriate narrative arc. But instead it was like, no, actually the obsession with this new girl is not the problem. He's got a drug problem. Like, really? Really?
Yeah.
And then, you know, we kind of touched on this pre-spoilers, but yeah, so the game ends with him in the hospital. They don't make the concert. He doesn't reconcile with his friends that the game suggests have been his lifelong friends. And you're supposed to feel like it's a happy ending because he's still with the new girl. Like she's there at his hospital bedside. But that was not happy from my perspective at all. It was like there was no catharsis in that. It did not feel like a journey for him or growth. There was no growth for him. The car accident was unrelated to his drug usage as well. So if they were trying to suggest that was some sort of a rock bottom, that didn't hit for me either. Like if you are telling this weird ass story about someone having really negative side effects to pot usage, like, okay. But like even that didn't get hammered home. And then for them to be like, well, if you go through and play all of the chapters perfectly, none of that bad shit will happen. And the band will actually go and play the concert.
Yes.
That's the bonus ending of the game that you can unlock if you play everything perfectly. The band will perform the concert and everyone will stay together.
What a slap
and his
in
drug
the face.
usage won't be a problem.
Yeah, like what?
So in order to be a successful artist, you have to be perfect. And not do drugs.
Right.
There you go, kids.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little bananas to me. And definitely I'd be curious to know, just what the life experiences of the game developers are, because it definitely feels to me like a game that was made by people that are either too young or too naive to have really any experience with these things that they were telling a story about. And it feels more like they made this like kind of aesthetic choice to use the 70s as like a vibe.
Right.
And musically it really works. The music in the game is great, but especially the like Simlish singing that they put in it, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But yeah, it feels like they didn't actually know anything about how to tell a story in that world. And maybe they should have chosen to tell a story that was closer to their life experience.
Totally. So play chapters 1 through 9, because that's like the, the band playing together, jamming, fixing up the van, and then just kind of ignore everything that comes after that.
Yeah. Or do it perfectly and then you'll just get the good ending.
Yeah. Which, again, no.
Yeah. I just think like I'm interested to see what this dev team does next. I just feel like they really need to think about. I feel like this is a thing that happens, especially with smaller game developers, is way more interest. Like you come up with a mechanic, you come up with a gameplay loop, and then you kind of just like slap a story on top of it. And I don't think people always think about, what is my story saying?
Right.
What are people learning from this? And it's not like, I didn't need this story to change my life. I didn't need it to do anything especially deep. I really think just shifting the story to being about him being obsessed with the girl instead of it being a drug problem would have been that, and the band getting back together at the end. Yeah. Would have been great. That's all you had to do. And I would have been fine. The story wouldn't have changed anyone's lives, but it would have been perfectly fine and enough to put these cool mechanics on and this cool artwork on and say, hey, that was a decent time.
Yeah. Or even
but instead, they like actively drove
yeah.
it into the ground.
Yeah. And I don't even like if they were like, oh, you know, it feels too stereotypical for it to be the girl. It's like, okay, then the van breaks down and they get stressed and they get in a fight because they don't know how to fix it immediately. It's like, there's so many other ways this could have gone for the story within the same scope of being like a 90-minute thing. Like there was just, it didn't need to do this. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Yep. 100%. So that's our feelings on A Musical Story and Horizon Forbidden West.
Yeah.
We're a little salty today. Giving you a little spice.
But it's like spice from our
hearts.
From our sweet hearts. Like, I just, it's like we're talking about this because we care and because.
Yeah, like, I think this game's doing something really clever with the rhythm mechanics. And I want to be able to recommend this game for people to play. And because this narrative just takes the weird left turn that it does, I feel kind of weird about telling people to go play this game. Like, I don't know if people should play this game, which is too bad because it's got beautiful artwork and a clever mechanic. And I wish I could just unequivocally say, go play this game.
Absolutely.
I mean, even if it was buggy as shit, I would be more apt to recommend this than like this narrative that just seems to be saying things that I really vehemently disagree with. So,
yeah.
And that I think like perpetuates harmful racial stereotypes.
Totally.
So, video games.
Legalize it. Video games. The end.
All right. I'm sure y'all are tired of listening to us at this point, so we're going to go ahead and move over into our interview. Today, we're chatting with the chaotically delightful Raccine Malcolm. Raccine is a freelance community and DEI director operating in the tech and gaming industries, as well as a founder of the Games Marketing Essentials Discord community, which is for individuals working in communications in the game space. Our conversation with Raccine centered on their approach to community building as an empathy-driven practice that aims to create havens for folks to grow and learn with each other. Raccine spoke with us about the importance of developing individualized experiences for community members to help them feel they belong, and shared why she loves doing this work in the game space specifically. We really had a lot of fun talking with Raccine, and I'm sure you all will too. So without further ado, here's our interview with Raccine Malcolm.
Well, hello to our wonderful guests, and thank you so much for joining us in the virtual Pixel Therapy Studio. To start, can you share your name and your pronouns?
Yeah, hi, I'm Raccine, and my pronouns are any all.
And Raccine, how do you spend your time?
That is a very good question. I feel like from day to day, it definitely varies. I feel like that's a very human sentiment, though. Every day is a new day, or sometimes you can get caught in the routine. Although,
every day is a winding road.
Yeah, it could be a winding road that ends in the same loop. Hopefully not. I hope I have branching narratives. But no, yeah. So I guess the typical routine would be, COVID has made everyone a little bit more socially withdrawn. I do try to go out when I can, obviously being respectful of COVID, COVID restrictions that are in place. But my typical day looks like, spending a lot of time with the animals that we have here, because we have dogs, we have guinea pigs, we have 2 hamsters that are very chaotic. We had rabbits at one point, but we don't anymore. Mainly, we just have a lot of dogs now. They're all really puppies. I'll say one of them sleeping over there. I showed y'all earlier. She's she's completely knocked out. She's like, good night. I'm
just splayed on the ground. Very comfy.
She looks like a little pancake from a distance. It's so cute. Aside from that, definitely trying to keep up with just other enriching things like regular professional development, and then outside of work, focusing a lot on getting back into language learning. So definitely one of my goals in life was to be a polyglot, and that had been derailed a couple times, but now I'm really focusing on actually learning Sanskrit, because I had a lot of different language focuses at one point. I partially know French, I partially know a lot of Romance languages, so I'm all over the place with that, but I really want to achieve full fluency in one specific language, whether it's written or spoken fluency. So I'm focusing a lot on Sanskrit, because that had a huge impact, I would say, on the way I developed growing up. So I had a lot of exposure to Hinduism as I was growing up, not necessarily in like a constrictive, like religious sense, but more in the sense that like I would explore a lot of religions and a lot of belief systems. And so Hinduism definitely was one of those, I guess, larger influences at that point in my life in terms of when I was exploring a lot of like spiritualism and spirituality and like religion as a whole, and kind of delving into like philosophical things. So definitely consuming a lot of like the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita, and like reading the English translations and feeling like I'm missing something, you know? So the original versions are obviously going to be in Sanskrit. And I feel like if I'm able to revisit that after learning it, I'm going to feel a lot more fulfilled. So that's one reason. And I think also learning Sanskrit also opens up the possibility of being able to interpret other languages and dialects within the Indian subcontinent. So I think it'd be pretty cool if I could learn the foundation of them all and then go on from there to like explore more. So that's one thing I'm really focusing heavily on. And then kind of going from there, also trying to learn classical Indian dance again, because that's something I'd also tried to learn initially, and then that kind of fell off. So I'm learning a lot of those things and trying to, I guess, reconnect myself with a lot of the physical activity I did growing up, because I did a lot of sports. I'd actually started with tennis, and I went pro for a little bit there, sort of, and then I did a lot of other sports alongside that, and martial arts, and it's a bunch of stuff. There's a long list of things that I could give you. So I'm trying to reconnect physically and mentally and all sorts of stuff like that.
That's wonderful. So you're a lifelong learner. And in addition to that, you also mentioned setting aside time for professional development. What do you do for work?
Yeah. So, what do I do for work? So I focus heavily on community development and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the tech and gaming industries mainly. But obviously that is not, DEI is not exclusive to any particular industry. Those are things that you practice within your day to day. But those are really the two focuses. And then I also fall in the like staffing and recruiting side, and then also social media. But, I'm kind of an amalgamation of all things communications.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading in your bio that you bring an empathy-driven approach to your community management and development work within the gaming and tech space. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what that means to you, what that looks like.
Yeah, that can look like a lot of different things. It just really depends on, I suppose, who I'm working with at the time. I think empathy is core. Empathy and high emotional intelligence are core to all things community. You can be extroverted, introverted, ambiverted. I mean, technically everyone's ambiverted, but they have a particular lean. But I think emotional intelligence, having a high EQ, and empathy are core parts to being a community person or a community professional, whether you're a community director, manager, specialist, whatever it is you could be. I think that's super important. And the way that manifests definitely is specific to every community. It could just be something as simple as just connecting with a lot of the core members individually, to be honest with you. There's so many different things you can do within a community space. I really like to develop connections with different people from different backgrounds in each community that I'm able to curate. And so having that understanding, being able to build those relationships and understand those perspectives, and then being able to curate more individualized experiences for those people within the community space, and having them feel like they're actually at home, because that's really the point of communities. Is I think that's what I really want to push out into the world when I say I create empathy-driven experiences.
And I'd love to talk more about your community development work, but before we do that, I want to back up a little bit and ask, you're working in this tech and gaming space. What's your own personal history with video games?
It's weird because I feel like being in Jamaica has also had an impact on that, and just my overall family background. I never really had consoles growing up. So whenever people tell me about their old experiences, like I would always see other kids, I guess, with their consoles and playing. And so I didn't have like the console experience growing up. I was more of like a PC gamer from the start. And I didn't even really grow up on typical games. I found myself really, really drawn to open world experiences where you could essentially replicate life within a virtual space, and whether that was like fantasy, sci-fi, whatever it could be. I remember at one point I was just so like drawn into Entropia Universe that I played almost every single day. It was an addiction. It wasn't an addiction, but it was like, you know, maybe you could tone down on playing it alone.
I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if you were going to say more about that.
That's me. I have a weird way of ending sentences, and I've been told about this too. I just end sentences really weirdly sometimes, and people expect me to continue, and I'm like, no, that's the end of the sentence.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the entire.
So, Raccine, do you identify as a gamer?
That is a good question, because it's the pause.
Yes, it's the pause for me.
I feel like in the traditional sense of what a gamer is, a person who plays games, yeah, I feel like there's definitely been a lot of overcomplication in terms of the definition of a gamer over the last, not even the last anything. There's just been overcomplication of what a gamer is from the very beginning. A gamer is a person who plays games. If you play games, you're a gamer. And I think a lot of the issue has been in the fact that games and the gaming industry as a whole has generally been uninclusive for the longest time. And I think that's why there's a lot of confusion about what a gamer is. A gamer is a person who plays games. Point blank. Anyone can be a gamer. And I feel like that level of exclusivity that has been present within the space for so long, it's so unnecessary. Like when you hear so many people trying to elaborate on what a gamer is, I'm talking about the people who are uninclusive. Like, a gamer is a gamer. A gamer plays games. What do you want? Do you want me to show you a formula explaining the mathematics of no, a gamer is a gamer. So yeah, sure. I play games, and I'm a gamer.
Absolutely. And to that point, Raccine, you founded Games Marketing Essentials, or GME, which is a inclusive Discord community for marketers, community managers, solo devs, and those in communications of all experience levels to learn, advise, and grow. What inspired you to create the GME community?
Yeah, so we're actually going through a rebrand right now. Like there's a bunch of cute logos and different things going on, and
fun.
It's actually being renamed to Games Community Garden.
Awesome.
And when initially, I had co-founded that with someone, not really going to mention them in this podcast for various reasons, but initially the idea of that community was to really create a space for folks within communication to have the opportunity to share knowledge and experience a nurturing environment where they could actually develop within the space, because there was a lack of a resource, like a cohesive resource like that at that time. So creating that space for, junior community managers, moderators, different people at different stages of growth and development should have the chance to easily access learning materials, right? And now we're kind of revisiting the project and how we can improve that experience for people coming in. And there are a lot of spaces popping up like GME or GCG now. And I'm happy for that. Those are opportunities to collaborate with a wider group of people who can tap into different networks and different folks. And we can all come together and create a collaborative learning experience so that newer people coming into the industry have a chance to come in feeling comfortable. And this is also one of the reasons why early last year, I said I'm going to try mentoring folks because I want folks to come into the industry being able to feel comfortable and empowered to actually work within the space. Because I definitely had a rough entry into the industry. I would say a lot of people have, to be honest with you, and whether it's, issues with financial disparity and underpayment or just unhealthy work environments. There was a lot of abrasiveness initially coming into the space. And this is why I really want to create environments where people actually have havens where they have room to grow and learn and understand how to even set standards for their own work environments within the space. Because definitely that's something a lot of folks struggle with. Even I had struggled with that up until I would say mid last year, when I really was able to definitively set certain standards for work environments for myself. And a lot of that had to do with like becoming more self-aware, even being more aware of certain mental health issues that I was having as well, and how those would impact the way I work and express myself within spaces. And not even productivity, not even impacting productivity, but just thought, and even hyperfixating on tasks, for example, and how those things affect things long term. So there were a lot of things that went into place for me really being able to definitively set standards for myself. And obviously these standards shift and change over time. So I think having a space where people can learn these things and share that information is really great for people just coming in, so that they can have a smoother transition into the industry. I think that's super crucial.
Absolutely. And how has the community grown since you first founded it? And what kind of milestones stand out to you as you look back?
Yeah, so the community has been a bit dormant for a while. We've been trying to kind of work on a lot of things in the background, like I said, to revisit how we can best grow the space. I think initially when we opened, there was a flood of people coming in because there was definitely need for the space. And I think there's definitely still need for the space and the different ideas that we have going on in the background, and, potential partnerships that we may engage in. There are a lot of ways that this can become much bigger than just a Discord space. It can become a resource that extends beyond that and is ongoing and supportive and nurturing. So I think there are milestones to come, and I would love to revisit that with y'all, let's say in a year's time. Let's see how we're doing after relaunch.
You alluded to it a little bit, but what did your own journey into games, working in the game space around communications and community building, what did that look like?
It's one of those things where I'm like, wow, what a journey, right? Because the level of growth that I've been able to experience in the last few years of being in the industry has even surprised myself, because when I initially came in, it was definitely overwhelming. The different moving parts in the industry and the different things and that you have to become familiar with, and just starting, especially as a freelancer, not necessarily a full-time person, is definitely a different experience, because you have to network. And you still have to network as a full-time person, but there's definitely more emphasis on that as you have to get clients. And, there were different experiences that I had with different teams, and I'm grateful for some. I did not like some. And I think that's just, I think that's a general experience that people in any working environment will have. And just being able to go through that. I had the pleasure of working with companies from all over the world, the US, UK, Europe, like different places. I can't say I haven't had like a very unique experience in terms of being able to work with people from different backgrounds and cultures. And now also that has helped me, like I mentioned earlier, to be more selective in terms of where I work too, in terms of standards, and even looking more into the team structures and being more intentional about how I even present in interviews. Because definitely initially when you come in, there's a lot of masking, I think. And I've stopped masking. In interviews, I'm me. Hello. I think there's a lot of, and you'll hear other BIPOC people speak of this issue too. And not even just BIPOC, but just diverse groups as a whole speak of masking and having to present in a certain way. And, definitely I think initially coming in, there was a bit of that where there were, I guess, even just acknowledging my neurodivergence was an issue for me and how that would present in the workplace. There were moments where I didn't even know what was going on in my own head, like with how overwhelmed I was, and I couldn't put that into words, really. I couldn't even understand it myself until there was some more intensive self-reflection there. But I would say just generally, if I had to describe it, it's been an interesting experience. It's still an interesting experience. And I think I'm definitely in a better position now than when I initially started in the industry because, like I said, better understanding of certain mechanisms within the space. And I've been able to meet a ton of wonderful people as well. That's been my highlight of working in the gaming industry, being able to meet so many different wonderful people with so many different wonderful experiences and even experiences that aren't so wonderful, but being able to create spaces where we can comfortably be vulnerable and experience these things and develop authentic friendships. That has been one of my favorite things in the industry so far. So despite everything that has happened and everything that will happen, I can say even though there have been unpleasant moments, I will say the pleasantries have trumped everything. I shouldn't have said pleasantries, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And why do you think the games industry speaks to you specifically? Why do you see yourself working in games versus all the other kinds of communications and marketing work that you could do?
That's a good question. I feel like I kind of bing, bang, boom stumbled into games, and a lot of people do say that. Despite the pitfalls of the gaming industry, I will say there's a certain level of appeal that it has to a lot of different groups because of the different experiences that are presented through games. And so it will still appeal to a diverse or a more diverse range of people as opposed to a lot of other industries that are very closeted. I'm not even closeted or gatekeepy or whatever you want to use for that phrase. But I will say, just even coming into the industry, being able to meet people with similar lived experiences too. And like I said, I think that's just the nature of games. It appeals to so many different people because of how games are. I think that's what appealed to me initially. And also, again, a lot of community people say this. We kind of stumble, fall, drip, just boop, 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 into games. And then I definitely expanded into the wider tech industry shortly afterwards. So I'm kind of half and half technically. I feel like gaming is in the middle of the tech and the entertainment industry, so it's somewhere in the middle. So I could probably flip-flop between tech and entertainment. I actually do want to as well, more for those huge YouTube channels. Think Jubilee, they have a job opening right now for community manager. I applied for that. I'll levitate if
we'll manifest that for you.
No, yeah, but I think I really like being a freelancer for that reason too. Again, the ability to just experience different teams, especially as I work on my own company, because I'm actually planning on starting an agency too. I think being able to work on these different teams and meet these different people will also help shape the way I form my own company and my own team and how that grows as well. So that's why I really love freelancing too, because there's so many ways you can present within a team, and there's so many ways teams can present to you, and so many there are these varied experiences, and some are bad, some are good, some are in the middle. And the variety of the variety of leaders that I've been able to meet too, I think definitely has shaped the way I intend to curate a space for people to work and learn and play, honestly.
As someone who works in community development, community management, what do you love about video game communities?
I feel like there are definitely a lot of things that I love about them. Probably the top thing being that they appeal to so many age groups and groups in general. I've been able to experience curating communities for kids, adults of different groups. I've had the pleasure of working with people who aren't necessarily native English speakers, and we've been able to I've been able to learn languages from even some of the moderator programs that I've developed. Because let's say I'll have French-speaking moderators or moderators that speak German, and I've been able to establish those relationships with them where I can pick up on learning languages from them, and I think that's super cool. And those end up developing into friendships too, because even the team of mods that I built while working with Space Ape, we're still friends to this day. And I love that. I love the ability of being able to go beyond just parasocial relationships and actually craft those those actual authentic relationships with community members, of course, with boundaries in place, because definitely you can't necessarily be friends with everyone, but you can be friendly with everyone, I think. So there's a huge difference there. And a lot of that has to do with boundary setting. And so I think just being able to have, I suppose, like a common goal in place for a lot of these communities, which is to play and have fun and explore games. I think that's a great way to connect with people in a very easy way, especially for those who are more introverted. I find that they nestle into like gaming communities very well too, because there's just a general point of connection right there.
So Raccine, you mentioned as a younger person not having a ton of access to consoles and, gaming being a little bit tougher for you to access at that time. But in your life today, what does your relationship with video games look like?
Yeah, I'm still definitely a PC gamer. I have not, even though I can get a console, I still haven't gotten one for whatever reason. I don't know what's really stopping me. I'm not going to start this war. If this is a war in the comments, we're not starting this war. Do not tell me which console to buy. I will.
PC gamers, rise up.
PC. I'm open to suggestions. I'm open to console suggestions, but don't bully me.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so maybe I'll get a console soon and kind of experience that, because I remember being on a vacation last year with a group of friends, and they had a console in the Airbnb, and so one of them handed me the controller. I'm like, fuck.
What is this? Yeah.
I've used a controller before, but it's still a foreign notion in comparison to oh yes, point and click, beep boop, problem solved. Now I have to click this, I have to move this, finger dexterity. Oh no. But yeah, no, I definitely need to get used to a controller.
Honestly, I have a ton of respect for keyboard gamers, people who are able to be really dexterous playing PC games using a keyboard and mouse. I don't know, you're smarter than me.
I feel like it's the same thing for people who are purely PC gamers looking at console gamers. They're like, fuck, more power to you. I can't do that. Well, sometimes, because then you have the hybrid PC console players who can do both, and then you're like, okay, yeah, you have ascended.
Absolutely, absolutely. So on this podcast, we like to invite folks to talk about games that had an impact on their lives or are super important to them. And you had you had a pretty good list of names that you gave us.
You can't ask me to give you a list, because I will, oh God.
You'll give it, yeah.
We got what we asked for.
Yeah, very eclectic collection of games. So just sort of speaking at a high level, what do you look for out of the games that you play? What draws you to a game?
Yeah, so I'm definitely open to a lot of different kind of games. I do definitely have a preference for, like I said, open world experiences. But then also I've had a love for these single player experiences that delve into the different aspects of the human consciousness and experience. And I really love being able to play those. So even through When the Darkness Comes, you get to kind of experience the inner workings of a developer and the variety of emotions that they experience through their developments. And it's a game that seems so simplistic in nature, but when you really actually play it, when you initially look at the premise, you're like, oh my gosh, basically sad game dev. That's what some people might interpret from the description. But when you actually play the game, you go through the experiences, it's all really heavily curated to allow you to even get a percentage of what that game dev experienced, and even not just in game development, but in their personal life and how those emotions manifested for them and how they then reproduce that in a gaming experience. I think that's, to put it really simplistically, that's some good shit. I love experiences like that where you're able to really tap into the feeling of different people and their different lived experiences. Those are games that I probably value above all else. And even Rome, that, oh my gosh, I'm not going to give any spoilers for the ending. I didn't give any spoilers for the ending of When the Darkness Comes. I want to also preface this with, like, if you're experiencing any mental health issues or you struggle with certain things like, you know, suicidal ideation, just be mindful of playing that game because the ending presents a choice that does relate to suicide. So just be very mindful of that. And then for Rome, that was an experience.
Yeah, tell us about Rome. That game looks wild.
I play it religiously every year. I'm sorry. Like every couple months I'm back on that game. I don't care how many times I've played it. It's literally, even though there are no new additions to it, every time I play it, I still feel more and more connected to the experience. I love that game, right? So you're essentially playing first person perspective from the view of I think she was an award-winning architect.
Yes.
And her experience with realizing that she died, basically. So you get to go through the different stages of grief and the way that's portrayed, like you actually connect with the character. And what I even loved more about Rome was the fact that they used living architecture to convey some of those thoughts and feelings. That is some scary ass shit. More than any other type of traditional horror, that made me shit bricks.
What, the using the house or the architecture as a function to create horror?
I love that. There are other games like that as well.
Like Inception type shit?
Yeah. That's some, but I, for some reason, that's even more daunting because then it goes into blight and how that impacts the feelings of your environment and the energy that your environment creates, right? Or the energy that you've left in your environment. Because there have been games about unoccupied spaces and the feelings that they resonate and things like that, or the energy that they resonate, or the frequency that they resonate at. And the way Rome is able to just so beautifully, and this was a student-made game, so beautifully and intricately design an experience where even the way the fucking chairs are positioned, just every single attention to detail and the slow deterioration of the space and how it becomes incrementally more chaotic as the main character realizes, oh my god, I'm actually dead and I died in a really horrifying way. Like, I have played few games that can make me sit back in my chair and go, oh my god, I'm horrified. Like, it's not even through visual horror, because there are, like, not like typical gore horror, but like there are certain aspects of visual horror that are present in the game, but just the emotional and psychological horror. You'll mainly find me playing games like that as well, because I find that you can have very human experiences through psychological horror games that are based in real spaces. So I like to have real experiences and real relations through games, and Rome really did that for me, because when the darkness comes, you get that perspective from the game dev and their life growing up. And then from Rome, it's a completely different experience where now the main character has to come to terms with everything that is going on. Like, everything that has happened to them up until this point, even seeing the news reports of their death. That's I don't even know how to explain.
Something I thought that was really interesting is not only is Rome a student project, and that's RHOME for the listeners who might want to look this game up. It was designed and built in just 16 weeks. And so I think that's just really cool that this is a game, Raccine, that you visit every year that has had such a huge impact on you, considering like the scope and the constraints around which it was built. That's just really cool to see.
Yeah, I think, like I said, any games that have real human experiences, even though there's like an element of fantasy, obviously, to them, not being alive and having to go through that process of acknowledging that and, entering the afterlife. I think it's really just leading up to that point. Those things can be mirrored in our life in terms of the way we have to deal with certain journeys. And the different stages of processing we have to encounter while going through these journeys. So it's a really great way to highlight some very typically human experiences, regardless of background. Anyone can have these experiences, and I think more than calling it horror, it's just reality. And I think to a lot of people, reality is horrifying. And a lot of these games can be very much grounding. And I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy here, but like, you know, like some aspects of reality can really be daunting. And sometimes playing these games can really be grounding and also help me to connect to some emotions and some experiences and feelings that maybe previously I couldn't put words to. And somehow this game or these games have been able to replicate those experiences in a way that's tangible and easy to process in a sense.
Absolutely. There was one more game on your short list that also I felt kind of fit in with the themes in When the Darkness Comes in Rome. And that game was called Nuts. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that game to us, because it completely went under my radar. I had not heard at all about this game. I believe it came out last year. And it's this kind of surveillance mystery set in the forest where you're this researcher who's recording squirrels and trying to, you know, track their activities and their nesting habits and whatnot. And slowly it kind of comes to pass that things are not as they seem, that these squirrels are up to something maybe a bit more mischievous. I was so interested reading the premise and watching the trailer for this game. And so I was wondering if you could speak more about it and your relationship with it.
Yeah, so Nuts. Actually, a close friend in the games industry that I had worked with at Happy Volcano, Almut. She had sent me the game, the key for the game to play on stream, because I had relaunched my Twitch channel at the time, and I wanted games made by diverse teams. And you know, I'm like, it's a scroll game. How could this go? How could this possibly go wrong? It's a game about monitoring squirrels. Oh my god! It was not just about monitoring squirrels. It went a lot deeper than that, and I think it went a little bit too deep for a game that's supposed to be monitoring squirrels.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so gosh, I mean, when you start playing the game, you're like, okay, yeah, we're just taking photos of squirrels and we're engaging in these different environments. I want to make a point of saying the color schemes in the game impact the overall experience, plus the audio and everything. It was just a well-rounded, beautiful cinematic experience. And even though it's like, it's supposed to be a game about taking photos of squirrels, it gets so much deeper than that when you realize it delves into things like emotional and environmental destruction through big corporations, and just how these impact the living environments of different animals, right? Those are some things that are tapped into. And also, you know, even at points where in the game things felt hopeless. I think I literally fell down a cliff in the game.
Oh my gosh.
And we're trapped in this spot, and we see all of these squirrels, and like squirrels with dynamite. Like there's so many different moving parts in the game, and it became so much more than what I thought it was going to be. And the ending was weird. The ending was weird. And this is the one spoiler I'm gonna make in this podcast. The ending was weird. I ended up on a boat with a bunch of squirrels and a bunch of nuts in the boat. And at the end of the game, I think I probably have it in my stream clip somewhere, I literally said, "What the fuck?" This was not just a game about taking photos of squirrels.
Yeah, I love when a simple premise, there's like this creeping realization that you've stepped into something deeper, and it I don't know, it always adds extra layer to me of like subverting my expectations. And I kind of love when a game is able to do that. I mean, very mixed review, I think I felt on Nuts, but maybe something that I may or may not check out, or maybe I'll just watch your stream.
It was a great experience. I will personally say that I loved it. There are elements of challenge in there in terms of where you have to place your cameras, how many cameras you have, and just the way it's sort of strategic too. It's supposed to be so simple. You're like, I just have to put my camera, blah, blah. it's really interesting in the sense that you have to be very precise and intentional about where you put your camera, what you get to observe, the photos that you take, the timestamps that you need to take these photos at. It's a lot, and I love it. And to me, it was a really good experience. And I mean, the people that were watching the stream enjoyed it too. Like they literally said, if you don't stream the rest of this, we're going to fight. Like I had people DMing me like, we need to see the end of this game. You're going to finish this. And I said, I have to anyways. I can't just not finish this.
Even too deep at that point. And I want to... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying 10 out of 10, though, would recommend.
Okay, great. 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Get those nuts. Find out what gets you on that boat. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about Entropia Universe, which you mentioned earlier, and seems kind of a departure from these other games because it's more of like a space simulator, right?
Yeah, so it's an open world experience, like I mentioned earlier. It's probably, I think, the only real like MMORPG I have on the list. So that, like I mentioned, is probably one of the first MMORPGs I played, really. And Entropia Universe made up a core part of, I guess, my early gaming history. When I really think about it, how many hours I had put into playing the game to the point where I'd be up at night just on Entropia Universe doing different things. I suppose you could call it a space simulator, but it's not necessarily limited to that because you have different planets that you can access in the universe. It also functions on kind of a real world economy in a sense. So it's a real cash economy game. For some reason, I forgot that term. And so at the time, what you did in the game, you could earn from that, right? So that was part of the reason why people were attracted to that game. And one of the biggest like virtual assets ever, like the most expensive virtual asset ever bought, that record is held by Entropia Universe. So a lot of people were drawn to the game because, oh, you can earn money from it. I wasn't really like hyper fixated on that. I just thought it was a super cool experience, and it was a really big game in terms of like the amount of space it would take up on your laptop and just the vastness of the universe and the variety of different planets that you could visit. I mean, I think I really loved. I think it's called Tulin. I hope I said that right. Let me just quickly Google that because yes, it's Tulin. So that was one of my favorite planets in Entropia Universe because it takes some inspiration from like Middle Eastern design. And I thought that was beautiful because when you land on the planet, because you have to get an actual like either a quad wing interceptor or any other space vehicle that you can fly in the game, and you can go there. So when you're actually landing and you get to look over the entire planet, it's just a gorgeous view. I think if you could do it in VR, that would be even better. I don't know if they've like modified the game now to where you can use VR, but I would totally play it in VR as well. I think that was the biggest thing for me. The sight and the scenery and how beautiful the game looked, even though they were using an outdated engine at the time, the game still looked so gorgeous. And even like the staff support in the game was pretty good. So there were just so many different aspects to the game that I loved. But the biggest one, aside from the collaborative effort that you can have in the game with like the different people that you meet, was definitely the scenery. I would just spend hours driving in that game or flying. I would just get lost. I'd turn on some music in the background, whether it was on YouTube or whatever, and I would just drive and see where I went. And of course, mobs destroyed my vehicle, which was very expensive. Ouch. Yeah. But it was a great experience. I love long drives, by the way, whether it's flights, drives. I just get lost in it. I zone out. It's a great experience.
Me too. I feel like they just go by in a snap because I just go into the realm of my own mind. But do you feel like your love of this big MMO was sort of laying the foundation of your future working in community development and connecting communities and building them? Yeah,
because I remember I wanted to actually work with that team at one point, like the devs of Entropia Universe. They had like a customer support or They had like a very specific name for that team. But I had wanted to get involved in that, and I ended up actually working for a team that was supposed to be their competitor called Virtueverse, who have a similar design, I guess, but they're not as big yet. I've done some volunteering for them early on. And so that definitely influenced the path I took into gaming, because that was when I really was like, yeah, maybe I could actually get involved in the gaming industry and do something here.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Raccine, where can folks follow your work and keep up with what you're doing?
That is a good question. So I am on Twitter. I'm a very eccentric person, as you can tell. I'm sorry, don't take that seriously. So my username is Fibonacci Recoil. Fun, yay. I have like my Twitch link there. I refuse to even remotely try to spell any of that out right now because it's Saturday. My work brain is off. My every brain is off. Let me just Saturday. That is it. You can also find me on LinkedIn too. And pretty much once you find me on Twitter, you can find me anywhere, really.
Awesome. Raccine, it was lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I will probably be back soon. With more chaos next time.
Absolutely.
Up for today's session of Pixel Therapy. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope that listening to our thoughts and feelings gave you some thoughts and feelings of your own. If you want more Pixel Therapy, come check us out at patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can snag that monthly bonus episode for just $2 a month, plus opportunities to get involved with the community and influence the show directly. If you're not up for contributing monetarily, but you enjoyed this episode, you can show your support for free by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts and following us on Twitter and Instagram at Pixel Therapy Pod. That stuff is just as important, and we appreciate it just as much. Remember that Pixel Therapy is a happy member of the But Why Though podcast network, so you can support us by supporting them and heading over to butwhythoughpodcast.com. That's though with a THO. Take a peek at the inclusive geek community they're building around pop culture news, reviews, and kick-ass podcasts like yours truly. And you can keep up with all this stuff and more by visiting our website at pixeltherapypod.com.
Finally, since we like to put our money and our energy where our mouth is, we end every episode with a recommended side quest. As many folks may know by now, on February 24th, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale military invasion into Ukraine. For the past days, cities have been bombed and civilian infrastructures have been destroyed. The number of civilian victims, including children, continues to rise, and LGBTQIA+ Ukrainians are also facing additional stress as they try to navigate this emergency. We wanted to bring your attention to an organization that's specifically trying to advocate for LGBTQ+ Ukrainians who are finding it especially difficult to either access resources or escape the country, especially trans folks with identification documents who don't match their gender identity, find that they cannot pass internal checkpoints in the country. Many also don't have a biometric passport matching their travel passport gender. And this biometric passport is required for entry into the European Union. The process of obtaining this kind of official documentation in mainland Ukraine has been difficult, even in peacetime before this event. And so many trans folks are finding that they're excluded from civil defense measures like shelters or humanitarian aid based on what's going on with their IDs. Mismatching ID documents can lead to denial of service, as well as suspicion of fraud, harassment, even violence. So fearing discrimination, many trans folks are finding that they're forgoing their right to seek assistance. So there's an organization called Insight Ukraine that has been established for years to provide resources and community to LGBTQ Ukrainians. Right now, they are starting an urgent donation campaign specifically to collect funds for LGBTQI+ people in Ukraine to provide emergency shelter, relocation assistance, food, and to cover their basic needs. So to find out more about this organization, Insight Ukraine, you can visit insight-ukraine.org and check out their website. They also have a big donation button on their site, and you can directly support this initiative and these funds, as well as, continuing to support individuals on the ground and organizations in Ukraine, helping everyone. We just wanted to take a moment to specifically highlight to the needs of especially vulnerable populations within Ukraine.
Thank you for that side quest, Spencer. That is our show for today. So go forth, run a story mission, level up some stats, and don't forget to hug an NPC every now and then. We'll be back soon with some more
Pixel Therapy.
Yeah. Bye-bye.